Hello. Uh-oh. Something screwed up with my volume.
Can you hear me? I can't hear you. You're muted.
I can't. Oh. Oh, no. This is the first time I've had problems with the volume.
No, you're fine now. You were muted. I wonder if anybody else is coming.
You're not on mute.
Can you hear me? Let's see.
Did that do anything?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Fucking hell. It's unmuted. So you can't hear me at all? Go.
No. No,
Oh,
I can't.
okay. It looks like mine is working.
Are 3 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, geez, I'm on the phone now, too.
That's crazy. Can anyone hear me?
I can now because I called in as well.
Dan, how about you?
Wow, you're on extreme echo.
Who's on that 828 number? How about now?
I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, you're better now. I hear you, Joe. You not hearing us, Joe? Hello?
Something's up with his computer. Did you hear anything from Chris, Dan?
Yeah, he said he was, while I was trying to figure out how to get connected, he said he was 5 minutes out. So
Oh.
that should be about 3 minutes out at the moment.
Okay, yeah, he just texted me too.
Let's see. So did we lose Joe completely?
He's hung up twice now because he can't hear anything. Do you not have video capability ever, or what?
I do. I don't know how to put it on now.
Hit the little camera.
I see y'all.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Hit the little video camera.
Unable to access camera. Gotta go to privacy settings. Blah, blah, something.
Oh,
While we're waiting, I'll see if maybe I can do it.
okay.
I know what a disappointment it is to not be able to see me.
I know. I just love to see your face.
Especially when I feel like shit. Oh,
Again?
yeah. I went to Paul McCartney. We went
Yeah.
to Paul McCartney, and I was feeling so bad after 20 minutes I had to fight not to leave.
Oh.
I mean, I stayed, but we had to go like hang out in the back hallway and
Oh, man.
other stuff. And we were like row 12, right? It was my Christmas present.
Jeez.
And we saw about a half or so the last third from our seats. But it was major suckage.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm back to that feeling like extreme bloat, but it's weird. I don't know what, I'm doing my best to fight off letting my head run away with, is it brain tumor or lupus or what the fuck is going on?
Damn.
I just picked up on the last of that. I got off the Zoom call with my computer because I couldn't hear anyone, and I just called in.
Okay, well, welcome back.
Yeah. Were you just not able to hear me, Kat, or could I just not hear you?
I could hear you fine.
Yeah, we could hear you, and we were, making fun of you and all that.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. That's the first time I haven't had any volume, unless I didn't turn my You know what? I wonder if I just had the volume off on my computer.
Did you have your speakers muted?
You know what? That's something that I could. Let me try this again. I'm gonna hang up.
All right.
Chris isn't on yet, right?
No.
Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
Oh boy, I tell you, talk about feeling foolish.
I've done that.
Geez, I just didn't have the volume on. Wonder why I had the. God. Oh well, never mind. Okay, I can hear you now. Thanks for making fun of me, though. I really like that. It makes me feel wanted.
Sorry, I'm trying to have my lunch because I haven't eaten. We were doing clinic. There's Dan the man.
There we are.
Yeah, there you are.
This is what I look like after I've been sick as hell for.
Well, you do look rough.
I feel worse.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. Head is it's been going on for a while now, so it's I'm looking at, like, I got an appointment Monday when I get back. I'm down at the coast. I'm gonna tell my doc, all right, we're doing something, or I'm going to the Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic or somewhere.
What is it? What's?
I don't know. The main thing is that I feel really tired a lot. And if you ever had the flu, how you feel when you get to that point where you're not in the John for one reason or another, but you're just feeling terrible.
Yeah.
That's how I feel a lot. And it
Ooh.
kind of hits me in waves. Yeah. I was telling Kat, went to Paul McCartney Monday night. It was my Christmas present. And after about 20 minutes, I had to like really force myself to stay. I mean, we went in the back hallway and listened to the show, some from there, and went to this area where we could stand and watch the show. And I mean, our tickets were on the 12th row. It was my Christmas present. And so it's been just a major yuck. But
Well, like I said, I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah. But all that aside, Chris, I don't know if you got it, Joe. Chris texted us and said he was a couple minutes late. I expect him any second now.
Okay.
My plan was to have some kind of a list of questions to talk with him, and I am sorry, but my thinker is just not working great. I mean, which is saying a lot because it, rarely works great. So
I can relate.
Yeah, I'll show you this. This is my view.
Oh, nice.
So I may go off the screen here in a minute just because I don't have a way. I don't have one of my handy phone proper uppers, and I'm not going to hold it for that long. And how are things in the mountains, sir?
Beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah, this is the best move I've ever made. I love living here. I like being close to the mountains before, and I like spending time in Asheville, but there's something that's a lot more special to me about being in the mountains in a small town.
Yeah.
And being retired helps too.
I found it makes a lot of things nicer.
Yeah.
So what's the primary thing we want from Chris today?
Well, my understanding from our last meeting, and I sent to Melissa an email inviting her to this too if she wanted to. I did that this morning. Because she might remember more of our conversation from our last meeting, but it's really to find out what has been done, at least from my memory, what has been done so far and what's in place around peer support supervision. Because I think, hi Chris.
Hey Joe, I'm so sorry guys for being late.
All right, but that's what I remember. We wanted to quiz Chris on.
All right. Hey, Chris.
Hey Dan.
Thanks for taking the time with us. I was just making my excuses. I meant to have like the list of questions that help get us started and all that, but my thinker is not online very well. But we really just kind of want to, y'all correct me or jump in anytime. What Joe was just saying, kind of pick your brain on what's being done for support for peer support specialists and what, if any, who all else is working on it and what roadblocks we're running into, or, just gonna, we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, sure. So Wake County under their kind of public health branch, is taking significant interest in this because they're funding the peer support specialists through the Wake County Overdose Prevention Coalition. So there's a group that has been meeting every few months to talk about what type of supervision is needed. And that's backed up into conversation about who's doing what at what point of a person's process. So, Rusty doing outreach to somebody who's just had an opioid overdose.
Joe, Rusty is one of our peer support specialists at
Okay.
the EMS at Human Transitions.
Him doing that is a little bit different than working with somebody who's completed a treatment program and is just getting some recovery support checkup type thing. So part of what the group's been discussing is like, yeah, we want to talk about what type of supervision and support is needed, but we also need to talk about what different risks or hazards are associated with the different type of peer support that's being provided. Also, in matching people with different peer support roles, who's a good candidate for a high intensity contact with people who are in active addiction versus somebody, so that group has been comprised of Nicole Singletary at Wake County, Carlisle Johnson with Alliance has been participating in it. Brandon Robinson at Fellowship Health Resources. They've got a fair amount of experience using peers, and they're also located in a few different states. So like they've got other states where they provide services and kind of draw on their experience and so forth. Southlight's peer support specialist has been attending. Terry with RCNC has been attending. I think that may be another person with the county has been attending. But so like that's one area where we're actively kind of having this conversation about, what do people need to do a peer support role? How to have a little more nuanced discussion about matching people to the appropriate task. Not everyone's going to be capable of doing some of the peer support that may have some different hazards associated with it. And then, let's see, Donald reached out to me. Donald McDonald reached out to me a couple weeks ago saying that he's helping with SAMHSA's, I guess, creating a technical assistance protocol, one of their tips on peers. And so he reached out asking about current peer supervision bibliography. And then he sent me a series of SAMHSA resources, like a PowerPoint slide deck of supervising peers, a one-page supervisor self-assessment, and then resources for supervisors around peer supervision. That's that was stuff that I had not seen, and was kind of good to see. So I'll forward that on to you guys.
Great.
And I haven't had time to dive deep into it. Kat, on the company share folder, there's a subfolder called Journal Articles, and it's kind of a catch-all for materials, and there's a subfolder in there called Peer Support. So I've put these SAMHSA resources in there.
Okay, great.
And you can always look in there if you're looking to search for something. There's a fair amount of articles and so forth in there.
Okay, on the UNC Peer Support Specialist website, there is a training that qualified professionals can do on supervising peer support specialists.
And who is this? I'm sorry.
On the UNC Peer Support Specialist website, there's a training that,
Can you send that link?
yeah, sure.
Because I'd like to take that to the county meeting. And if you want to, at the next meeting that we're having with the county is going to actually be here at the men's campus on June 17th, which is a Monday. And that's going to be, I think, I'll have to create an Outlook on it. I think it's 2 to 3:30.
And
Sure, I'll send you a link to that. I started doing that training. It's pretty good so far because it goes exactly like by what skills peer support specialists have and what kind of supervision that peer support specialists need according to those skills and how they can be supported.
And I'm sorry, Chris, the thing you were saying that's happening the 16th and 17th, that's with Wake County.
Yeah, so it's the initiative is being driven by Wake County since they're funding some peer support stuff out of the Wake County Drug Overdose Prevention Coalition. So they're funding Rusty and Ashley's position, but they're also, contracted with RCNC for them to develop a curriculum and to get peers trained. And through that process, the question came up about what type of supervision do these peers need? What kind of, experience do they need to have, et cetera. And I said, I think we need to think a little bit about what role a peer is expected to play at what part of the person's process, and kind of get a better, kind of bigger picture strategy around it.
Well, okay. And is that open to the public or?
You could come to it. I'd be fine with you coming to it, particularly since the next one's at the men's.
Okay. So is there any talk or thought? I mean, one of the things I keep getting concerned about is since this is a certificate and not a license, are there any kind of teeth to it about, what happens if somebody doesn't get the supervision they need or where they're working, really not giving them supervision or, is that kind of stuff being addressed or is it's still too early in the?
No, it's a concern that, again, as I said, when I kind of came over to your table, it's bubbling up on multiple fronts. And so the timing is good with this because a lot of people are talking about it all the way from peers up to funders, basically think of the county as a funder and so the time is good for these types of conversations. RCNC is creating these monthly peer support specialist supervision things. It's not really, it's more educational than supervision, just I say from the standpoint because they get a different presenter each month.
Right.
So it's not like it's a regular supervision group. And what I did was I did the professional quality of life self-assessment scale that helps you look at your compassion, your burnout, and your secondary trauma exposure. And we had a lot of conversation just around kind of the need, why supervision is important and so forth. And so somebody brought up like, so what happens for the person who's peer support who uses, and this is a peer support person, and then, then they're back at work in a couple months or whatever, And I was like, it seems like we're so far away from coming up with something like that. Like, what do you do with an impaired peer? Because we haven't done it with impaired addiction professionals.
Right.
Doctors have it, all these other disciplines have it, but we have nothing for addiction professionals who are impaired. So it seems like until that happens, I don't know, maybe peers could innovate better than addiction professionals, but it just hasn't been on the radar in any way of how to. So the conversations that people are having are like, one, this recognition of, we've got people who have passion, talent, and so forth. We're throwing them into positions without helping them be better informed about what they're stepping into.
Right. Supported
when they're in it, and monitored in some ways. Like, so for here, I've been talking with Amanda about wanting to do this professional quality of life assessment quarterly, just as a way to do something to check on the well-being of the individual and kind of the importance of that. The other thing that comes up or came up yesterday, has come up before in meetings I've been in, is agencies hiring people as peer support specialists, but not exactly understanding what a peer is and having them do non-peer things.
Yeah, Kat was telling us about that, about having them do
treatment plans and things that peer support specialists are not qualified to do.
And then the last thing was, and I'm glad to hear about a peer support supervision training that you can go through, Kat, because realizing that there's some clinicians who probably aren't well suited to do supervision for peer supports because they just have such a clinical lens that they can't see it any other way.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so for instance, we're looking to get Rayford some supervision. And Amanda says, let's pair him up with Scott Lucanow. And I'm like, the disconnect between Scott and his clinical practice and experience and so forth, and Rayford's lived experience and what he does here seems so great that I think you'd have Rayford in there, but no real comprehension of what's going on, and not being attuned to the fact that this person's not comprehending or connecting. Right. And I said, I think West would be a better person to do supervision for Rayford. Another example, like Shane had been doing supervision for Rusty and Ashley. And now that he's moved to Asheville, Justin's like, we need to find a new supervisor. So I called up Stephanie Treadway and said, hey, Stephanie, would you be open to doing some supervision? I'm not certified anymore. I don't need you for that type of supervision. I need you for somebody who understands being in recovery, working in systems, having boundaries, and taking care of yourself in the process. And she's like, oh yeah, I can do that. I was like, that'd be super helpful. So that's a little bit what I mean. And then the other thing that we talked about is like models of supervision where, like, as you've talked about, Dan, is there a group of peers that meets for peer support of peer support? Like there's as peer support specialists, they're supporting one another and sharing what their challenges are and what their successes have been. blah, blah, blah.
There is a group like that.
And then is there another, more of the, here's the one-on-one individual supervision where the person can get into, I'm really having a tough time with this, or it's hard for me to ask for help right now. I'm having my own struggle type thing, and so forth. So Kat, the group that you're talking about, is that through Alliance?
Yeah, Victoria's group meets once a month. They do like CEUs, but it's also like a support group for peers.
Yeah, Carlisle's brought that up. Do you know if it's real broad, like a lot of people doing mental health, peer support mixed in with addiction, or? Because I think that's the other challenge with this is,
it's all kinds of people. I've not been yet. Angela and I were going to go last time, but they canceled it at the last minute, so we've not attended yet.
And the addiction recovery peer support seems to have its own unique challenges and issues, and almost feels like they really need their own unique group peer support. I mean, I almost look at it like the addiction profession. My experience has been there doesn't seem to be an adequate number of clinical supervisors. Clinical supervision has fallen into, has become, this is a checkbox. I've got to check this off to meet a requirement. And just the whole concept of the value supervision seems to have been lost in the field. And I think a lot of that has to do with reimbursement and overhead, and we can't afford to do this, and we can't afford to make this a priority. And if I'm taking an hour a week for you to be out of that, and that's an hour away from a billable service or something. That's just my sense. I hate to say it that like Brian Kuhn and I did this presentation in APNC spring conference, and they reached out like, hey, would you do something on supervision? I was like, only if Brian can do it with me. I can talk about bad supervision, and he can talk about really good supervision. I grew up in a system that didn't value supervision, and it was very much just a compliance regulatory type of experience, as opposed to here's how we mentor and cultivate you, and this is how you develop into a good professional, and et cetera. I don't know. Joe, what do you think?
Well, as I'm listening to everything that's being said, and that when we came up with this at our table as a topic to see where we could do something, I didn't realize there was so much going on. And there is a lot going on. So one of the things that I'm challenged, and I think that we as a group from the Recovery Alliance is challenged to do, is come up with a niche of where can we be of some value. We had this really broad topic. And now I think we need to find really, with maybe some suggestions from everyone, is what would that niche be? Where can we be of some value? Because just to try and reinvent the wheel, try and reinvent a lot of things that are all already being done, I don't see the value in that.
I see some value in more voices that are, like, I'm encouraged to hear this come up at your table, and encouraged, it's like, we need more voices that are kind of stepping up, saying, these are things we think are important and things that we think deserve priority. Like, we want to really advocate that that as a standard, we expect our profession to provide peer supports with opportunities for supervision, and I don't know what that looks like, if it's a statement, of kind of, these are expectations that we would like to strive for as a state of North Carolina. We want to strive to do these things to support peers, and something aspirational that other folks could look to. I don't know if it's pulling together resources and helping to inform other conversations. I don't know if it's being a connector, connecting the other parts of the state that are talking about these issues and so forth. But, and there's still just simple value for saying, guess what, this conversation happened here, it's also happening here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting by any means that we drop our whole focus around peer support, but maybe it is supporting and doing something around advocacy and making sure that the whole idea of peer support and the care for peer support specialists, that we're there to help coordinate and expand the whole advocacy effort, if there even is one, along those lines. The whole idea of being a connector is another piece of the puzzle that I was thinking that maybe we as a group could be of some value. But to come up with a list of all the things that we think are needed, I think there's a lot of research there that maybe that's something else we pull together and pull the information from Wake and from SAMHSA and develop a resource directory for peer supports.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we as a group need to come to a decision on where we think we want to head.
Would it be helpful, Dan, I forwarded you the Outlook, and Kat, did you get it from Bonnie?
I think so.
For the June 17th meeting? It may be worthwhile to kind of attend that and then see what thoughts come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like just to see, be part of it and see what thoughts that brings up, if it clarifies the focus or helps with thinking about a direction. Or
Right. Yeah. I guess that's some of my concern overall about the whole process of, so there's UNC is, there, the peer support section there at UNC, that's kind of the overall certifier of the state. Am I correct? They're the
Yeah.
closest to us.
They, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kat, they approve the curriculums. They issue the certification.
Right.
They deal with recertification.
Right.
I don't know if they have a process that's built around impairment.
There is not, because it's a registry. That's something that we're talking about now. See, because we're just a registry, it's not really, you know, it's a certification, but it's not, you know, there. If we wanted to become a board like the substance abuse board, we'd have to go and present legislation. So that's something that we're discussing now, but we're not at that point where we can bring, you know, it forward to have the legislature. So right now, because that's the thing that we're kicking around, is that we have no teeth for people that are impaired or who don't follow the ethical guidelines. You know, we thought about, could we put them on like the nurse aid registry where they, you know, check and see if people have charges against them or abuse or whatever, but we can't do that either. So these are things that we're trying to work out as well. So right now there's nothing that we can do.
So basically, like this thing with Wake County. So they've got, since they're putting up the bucks and it's in their county, they can really do vastly different than, say, Ashe County or whatever county it is you're in, Joe.
Yeah.
You know, you get into little tinky, or even the bigger counties, you know, that Mecklenburg may say, oh yeah, they can do, this, and this, and we're just going to let them run wild.
Yeah.
But I agree with you too, Joe, that it's that we need to figure out what our focus is, that we could get the most bang for the buck, because we're definitely not big enough to, you know, to rewrite, you know, the whole system. But we might be able to do a little change, or at least be a, you know, it doesn't take a big pebble in a shoe to cause some pain.
No, and part of it too is that we can stay focused on this and keep this as a focus. When we get together as the Recovery Alliance again,
Exactly.
we talk to a much larger audience, either in our regional areas or the entire area. And then I think that's where we continue to say this is important, and a lot of other ears hear that.
I think that's an excellent point, Joe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really think we might be onto something here.
I mean, the fact that this has gotten brought into the Alliance framework, you know, like it's part of the conversation. Like the best thing is, you know, that it's coming up at the regional events, that it's a placeholder in all discussion, that next year at the state one, here's updates on what we've done. Like all that kind of elevates it from the ground up. And I think like what's happening here in Wake County, Dan, is folks saying we need to set our own expectations and standards and kind of agree as a community that this is what we want to adhere to.
Yeah. I think one thing just hit me. I don't think we're anywhere near using it yet, but at some point, you know, the professional counselors and the substance abuse board and the MSWs, all those boards can be resources of when we say you can't have a peer support specialist cannot do blah, 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 blah. It's because these other boards have laws saying the only people that can do that are the ones that are duly licensed, you know, and that may be some teeth on down the road to say, okay, it's not, you know, it's not illegal for the peer support specialist to do this so much as it is for his supervisor or her supervisor that is licensed to be having somebody do that. And that gives some, like I said, I just had that thought, and somewhere down the road that may, because that's there. Nobody's gonna. Blue made the big point. If too much, it becomes too much on the employers, then they're just going to quit hiring peer support specialists and just have, you know, a non-peer support specialist that's got no time in recovery do the same thing.
Yeah, but having Alliance there as a funder, is one of the things that helps with that.
Okay.
Because you know, are all the MCOs, do they have any list of guidelines for peer support specialists? I know there's only certain things that peer support, you can bill for peer support specialists, but that's limited as well, correct? And are all the MCOs similar on what peer support specialists can bill for, or what the agency can bill for?
Well, I think they all share the same Medicaid standards.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense.
But I think that they may differ in what they do to use their unrestricted dollars that they allocate out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, if you can, you know, even if it's not something billable, but it's something that's got to be done that should be done by somebody that's licensed, or you get somebody unlicensed to do it, and then it just gets billed under the licensed person's stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, Carlisle from Alliance has shares a lot of the same things and observations about how peers are used in different organizations, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think, yeah, I definitely think come into the next meeting and then you guys reporting out to Joe of what that brought up for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And that meeting is when? June 17th?
Yeah, Monday, June 17th.
And I think our next call is June 10th. So maybe what I'll do is contact Melissa, because she's the only other person of our group. And maybe we have our call after your June 17th meeting. Does that make sense, Kat and Dan?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
We had Amanda at our table. She hasn't been on the phone.
Oh yeah,
call.
Amanda, right.
And then the other lady who I do not know her name. The one that was sitting beside me at the table, if you can remember that far back.
Who was sitting beside me?
Well, actually, she was sitting between us. Yeah, I can't remember her name either. Well, at least I can remember her. I got that, but
Well, that's good, because I don't.
I got that, Ron.
Yeah. Must be this mountain air has got something in it.
Yeah, that's what we'll say.
Okay, all right.
Okay, yeah, we can change that. How are we doing on time? Yeah. Chris, what do you, let me throw this out there. What do you think, or what do you see as the biggest need or stumbling block or,
Are we talking about me, Dan?
well, personally, no, I got the answers to those. that I'm just waiting for you to ask. But no, I'm talking about the peer support specialist.
Do you have a good one you could link to me? I mean, the biggest issues that I see with it.
Or it could even be what's really good about it that's not getting out there as much as should be, that people aren't taking advantage of.
I mean, what's really good about it is it's where a lot of the real work gets done. And people are beginning to understand that and value it and recognize it and so forth. Like, I remember Bill White telling a story, and it's this whole thing of like overestimating the value of the professional in some ways.
Yeah.
They're like, they did this study and they found out it was a non-12-step oriented program, and they found out all these people were going to NA. And they couldn't figure out, well, how we don't introduce them to 12. Why are these folks going to NA? It's like the guy who was monitoring, doing the urine drug screens, you know, it's an NA guy.
Yeah.
They connect with this guy or whatever, and, you know, he just tells them about his recovery, and they start checking it out and things like that. You know, the good things, or the peers, do so much to engage people, to help them with the things that happen outside of the office. And this has gone on for a while. So if you go back to some of like Scott Miller, like Mark Hubble is his first, you know, they wrote a book called The Heart and Soul of Change. And they put out there this meta-analysis of like, when you look at factors that influence change, you know, 60% of it's what happens outside of the office, extra therapeutic factors, you know, 15% is theory or approach, 20% is related. Like they just kind of emphasized this much is what's happening outside of the office. The hospital.
They killed all the therapists thinking it was them and their theory
or their model. Yeah. But listen, the same narrative is happening now with hospitals, because as they get more towards value-based care and reimbursement based on outcome, I'm now hearing the hospital spokespeople say 80% of health outcome has nothing to do with what happens in the doctor's office. And so there's a huge investment and focus on which I think is being driven by the fact that we're only going to pay you for good outcomes. Well, shit, we can't provide the outcomes that it's because we don't have control over a lot of things. So how do we provide the supports to people in the community? Tremendous value of peers in that. The things that have always concerned me is, peer support comes out as, here's the certification. You got people that, have lots of obstacles and barriers to rejoining society. And somebody says, yeah, you may not be able to go to school and get a master's degree, but man, you could go and get a peer support, certification. There are two things kind of parallel happening. There was the peer support certification, and a little bit before that was a lot of the private for-profit online schools that were aggressively marketing people who are not going to get into traditional schools, right? And saying, hey, we can get you in, we can get you funding, blah, blah, blah. And people end up with these degrees or this certificate and this debt, more so with the private online schools than with peer support, but not really any opportunity to use it. Or if they do use it, it ends up in a setting that is not aligned with what peer support should be doing. So those are some of the system risks, I think. I just don't want to take people's enthusiasm and their hopes and expend them because we bought the car, drove the shit out of it, and never took it in for its maintenance.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate all your input. Kit and Dan, do you have anything else that you need? And then I'll get together with Melissa and have her send the invitation out for another date for our meeting.
That sounds good.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, guys. And I apologize for being late. It has literally been that type of day for me.
Okay.
That's all right.
All day been messing up.
I'm on to the next meeting, so
Well,
you guys.
all right. Yeah. Good talking with you all.
All right.
Bye.
Take care now.
Okay. Bye.